right, let's talk about Matt Walsh, because everybody likes talking about Matt Walsh, right? Right? That's how it works, right? Melody also dropped... I have to interrupt this stream to announce that, Uwu is on the table, thanks to Melody Starflare. Their citizenship rights are being revoked as we speak. The FBI is on their way to their house, and the orbital missiles have been dropped. I believe that the FBI casualties will be insanely big, but definitely warranted. Worth it. Anyway, thank you for the hydrate, Van Briggs. I'll take care of that real quick. That said, we got to get some fan art out of the way first before we get into Matt Walsh. Maybe not into Matt Walsh. That would be kind of weird. Anyway, this first one is from Vi Lubstein. Said, Suris Mikoded by Vi Lubstein. If this gets featured, my name is pronounced like Vi in violin or violet. Same as Vi in League of Legends. Fair enough. Thank you very much. And I guess a Makot makes sense for my character. I guess it does. The next one we have here is from Jet. Says, let's all take a moment to thank Has Been Hotel. I mean, yeah, Timer-kun being a TV guy like Vox makes perfect sense. I'll go ahead and take it. As always, thank you all for your fan art submissions. If you want your fan art to be shown in a future video, the best way to do so is to drop your fan art into the fan art section of the Discord. With that said, very, very quick aside, as per usual, we are currently sponsored by HelloFresh, so go ahead and check the description if you would like meals delivered directly to your doorstep. They're honestly pretty tasty, and they are sponsoring the channel for at least a few more weeks, so I would highly recommend them. If you've got any dietary restrictions, you can obviously check their website for stuff that might be able to work within those restrictions. That all said, thank you, HelloFresh, for sponsoring the channel. And for my part, let's go ahead and get into things. Speaking of food, Matt Walsh is having to fight his own audience right now because of milk, of all things. Let's go ahead and get into it. So, Matt has been fighting the milk battle. People in his audience, people who like Matt Walsh, are angry because Matt Walsh prefers pasteurized milk. Because apparently, milk has become a political battleground now, and Matt Walsh, of all people, is having to fight against it. He's having to fight against the anti-science audience he cultivated at the moment. Weeniezilla here saying, pasteurization wasn't invented until 1862. Humans were drinking raw milk well before that without any issues. There was nothing dangerous about raw milk. Which, I have to agree with Matt Walsh here, saying this is 85 IQ logic, truly stupid. Many basic hygiene and sanitization practices were not invented until the last century or so. Surgeons didn't even start washing their hands until the 1870s. People died all the time from preventable germs and bacteria of thousands of years. Another post in there being somebody from Case Bradford going, 15 different raw milk options available on the shelf at the store. 3-block walk away. Every American should have this level of access to healthy and nourishing food and local raw milk. Matt Walsh says that raw milk is disgusting, we live in a first world civilized society, and people are actively choosing to consume milk ridden with E. coli and listeria. Pasteurization is not some evil sorcery, it just kills the dangerous bacteria, you morons. So, for those who don't know about what pasteurization is, though you probably should have learned about it back in school, it is the way that we make sure that food is safe. Generally speaking, you heat the food to about 212 degrees Celsius, so about boiling, and that eliminates all the pathogens that are in the food. If you've ever looked at any type of, like, just say water as an example, those videos of water where they show the water straight out of the tap or straight out of a river, and it's filled with microorganisms, and then as soon as you boil the water, their activity ceases. They just become dead. They become free protein for you in your water after you boil it, right? Said 200 degrees Celsius is well beyond boiling. Yeah, I said Fahrenheit, didn't I? Did I say Celsius? Did I say Celsius? Because it's 100 degrees Celsius, 212 degrees Fahrenheit. But you basically boil the food long enough to kill those pathogens, and then you get it cold again. The milk that you drink, generally speaking, is probably something that has been boiled for a decent period of time and then thrown back into cold storage. So, why do people think this is bad? Because this one's interesting to me. Well, it's because milk, again, like I said, has become a political battleground. We'll talk about that here in a second, after we have one more fun Matt Walsh post here. Taran saying, wrong. You wouldn't pasteurize breast milk. Milk is a living food. So the reason you don't pasteurize breast milk is due to convenience. That is it. The fact that breastfeeding can conveniently be done. Sakura says, I believe milk cannot be heated to 100 degrees Celsius. I'm just explaining what milk and fruit juices are treated with mild heat, less than 212 degrees Fahrenheit. But a lot of things can be heated to 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Basically, you heat it to where you kill the pathogens. That's what you care about. If the microorganisms are still alive when you look under the microscope, well, at least a lot of them, then you probably heat the milk up enough to get rid of them. Anyway, specifics about pasteurization aside, the specifics that, quite frankly, don't matter. We're in the weeds on that one. At this point, just Google pasteurization if you want to see the exact temperatures that we need to use for each individual food. Anyway, Citra says, so if you drink it from the cow, it's okay? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. So when when milk from any donor besides the immediate mother is involved, we actually typically end up pasteurizing it anyway. So donor milk from, like, donor breast milk for babies actually does get pasteurized. And in fact, actually, she got community noted in here as well. Pasteurization deactivates most viruses, including CMV, hepatitis B, C, and HIV. So pasteurization is still a process that you would use when it comes to breast milk. And of course, Matt Walsh, known expert of milk, seeing as he tried to dunk on Nominal Naomi for giving her own child breast milk, says, humans are not farm animals, they don't live in barns, they don't lie around in dirt and shit all day. Do I need to continue listing the differences between human beings and livestock, or is that enough? This is a bad example. Yes, human beings are different than livestock. We treat them differently, generally speaking, and we try to be better about our fellow humans than we do when it comes to animals. There's an entire sub-conversation that can happen in regards to that particular statement, but I'm not here for that sub-conversation. Generally speaking, you do not want to have milk that is left at room temperature for a long period of time where multiple bits of bacteria and viruses can grow in it. You want to sterilize that milk unless it is being immediately, and I mean immediately, drunk by somebody, and usually in that case, you're only dealing with a baby and breast milk. That's about it, right? And yet, there are people who are responding to Matt. I hate that I have to agree with Matt on this, who are saying, I love your commentary and work, but this is why when the grid goes down, urbanites will survive a week. Humans where I live do spend most of their days in barns, in dirt, in shit. They vacation by sleeping under the stars. They eat eggs in the morning after rinsing off chicken poop. They drink milk from a cow after straining to get the hair out. Eat fish they just caught, blah, blah, blah. We're just fantasizing about living in rural areas. That's all this is. This is all just rural fantasy. That's what that is from top to bottom. I don't have to care about it. You don't have to care about it. But it is funny seeing the meat we have butchered is 100 times safer than the hamburger on your shelf that is an amalgamation of meats from 100 unhealthy rammed through a massive processing facility and then mixed with cleaners and dyes. So, technically, they're not entirely wrong here. Hamburger patties that you make from a cow that you slaughter in your own farm will actually have a lower risk of any kind of infection than hamburger that is made in a processing facility, because hamburger made in a processing facility is whatever animals they could shove through the processor. Like, that's just how that works. Nixie Chan resubscribed for 12 months. So I do, thank you very much for that. And then give it the hydrate Nami. So I do agree with the sentiment of this post, but again, the entire thing is just worshiping rural people, basically. And as somebody who used to live the life of, I can wake up and go get eggs and just wash the poop off of them from the chickens and go ahead and eat the eggs, I appreciated that life for all of a couple weeks. And then I have a friend who grew up on a farm and cared about it far more than I did, and I gave the chickens to him because I could not do it every single day. Now, granted, do I know how to fish? Absolutely. I could go catch my own food if I need to. Do I know how to forage? Do I know how to plant food? Absolutely. I have a garden with a potato that we need to harvest right now. A big potato plant about this big, along with a bunch of garlic and some red peppers. The peppers haven't started growing yet, but the garlic is about done. The potatoes are about done. And I don't remember where the onions are exactly. I guess we'll find out when we dig them all up. But where I am, I have not spent a lot of time gardening, but I do know how to. I do know how to grow my own food. I do know how to do all these things. But I'm not going to sit there and go like, yes, when the grid falls, I will be the one who survives. Like, my guy, what's the actual chances of the grid going down? In the entire United States, what are the chances of power going down? These people fantasize about apocalypse happening right now on our doorstep. But we want to go ahead and move past this. I find it funny that Matt Walsh is having to fight this this milked battle. He's having to milk this particular discourse as far as he can. But Politico actually has an interesting article that I wanted us to go over as well that was written in March about how, let's read the title, how raw milk went from a whole food staple to a conservative signal. In 2008, as he was running for Iowa House of Representatives, Jason Schultz was stunned to learn that dairy farmers could get in trouble for selling milk. A local farmer had shown him the cease and desist letter he received from the Iowa Department of Agriculture for selling milk straight from his cows to his friends and neighbors without pasteurizing it. So, one of the first things Schultz, a Republican, did upon winning was introduce a bill to legalize the sale of raw milk. The bill went nowhere, which wasn't much of a surprise in a legislature controlled by the opposite party, though almost no one in either party was interested in fighting a small army of big dairy lobbyists and public health officials who lectured about the dangers of potentially fatal bacteria. Moreover, the state had a long-standing prohibition on the sale of raw milk. Indeed, in 1980, Iowa jailed a 37-year-old dairy farmer, Delbert Banowitz, for 30 days for the offense. So, I will say, to begin with, that actually, yes, there is a giant dairy lobby in the United States, and that dairy lobby is responsible for the Got Milk campaign, or not directly, but paid by the same people. The dairy industry is a giant booming thing, and a lot of the milk is a staple of your diet rhetoric came directly from them. Turns out, after you are old enough, milk is not a staple of the average human diet, as evidenced by most of us being lactose intolerant. Now, to fight the dairy industry, a lot of milk alternatives were actually brought in. Things like almond milk, things like silk were brought in as alternatives to milk, specifically because they owned the greatest part of the industry and there needed to be some kind of competition there. But a lot of those brands have been discontinued. You can't find silk on a shelf anywhere now, as far as I can tell. A lot of these brands ended up losing the fight with the milk industry. Why? Because the milk industry started making its own milk alternatives themselves. So for every plant-based milk, every almond milk, every soy milk, every one of those that you could manufacture, 2 to 3 times as much could be manufactured more cheaply by the dairy industry, and they wouldn't be making plant-based milk. They were making things like lactate. They were making milks that removed the actual parts of milk that cause people digestive issues so that people could still enjoy milk. And they're doing it for less cost than what the plant-based milk industry was able to compete with. And in some cases, they would just buy them out anyway. This is something that we've seen happen with things like YouTube, where YouTube bought Vine, and now Vine is dead. So these industries, despite the fact that milk has a much higher concentration of climate effects, it has a far higher slew of health problems than, say, plant-based milk, it doesn't matter because they can afford to sell their product for a lower cost. So that ends up being what we have in the stores everywhere. The raw milk thing, though, is interesting to me. Why is raw milk being sold by, in many cases, the exact same industry? Well, again, that's what we're reading the article for, because the idea of the raw milk is now being seen as a conservative position to have. The idea that raw milk is better for you, healthier for you, grows hair in your chest. Here in CT, you can still get silk. Interesting. I've not been able to find it anywhere here. Said Schultz wouldn't give up, pushing the bill year after year. Very slowly over time, he ended up attracting other supporters like Esther Arkfield, a homeschooling mom and dairy owner turned grassroots leader who argued raw milk had health benefits and could help small farmers. Last May, Schultz's bill finally passed, legalizing the sale of raw milk directly from farm to consumer. The vote, 37-13 in the Senate and 64-34 in the House, wasn't particularly close. What changed since 2008 is a vivid example of a large upheaval in American politics. The Food and Drug Administration and the Center for Disease Control still say raw milk is dangerous, and the state dairy lobby sent lobbyists to the Iowa Capitol to defeat Schultz's bill, but Iowa has flipped. It's a Republican state now. From the presidential vote to the governor's office to a near supermajority legislature, and that flip has occurred alongside even larger shifts in national politics, spurred on by the rise of Donald Trump. With Trump has come a new GOP electorate, one more rural, more working class, less ideological, and generally more distrustful of lobbyists, big business, and the experts. And that has been a big help for a cause that is bucking just about every one of those groups. Long a fringe health food for new age hippies and fad-chasing liberal foodies, raw milk has won over the hearts and minds of the GOP. This is interesting to me. This happens with a lot of industries now. So if you remember, about 20 years ago, if you wanted to find an anti-vaxxer, you looked to the liberal left. You looked to the environmentalists. You looked to the people who wanted to live a more natural lifestyle. Those were the people you had on the left. And then the shift ended up happening after a while where the right became more anti-science. The right became more anti-vaxxer. The right became more naturalist than the left on the whole. And this is another example of that. Whereas once upon a time, most of the people who would espouse the benefits of raw milk were going to be your liberal hippies on the left. Now it's people who are trying to showcase that they are part of the right-minded people in the Conservative Party. Hilgen in Oregon says there's no benefit to drink raw milk. I don't think there's any benefit either. Like, no benefit that can't be found in other areas in far less risky, far more healthy ways, right? But by that same token, milk itself, the only real benefit outside of a couple vitamins is calcium, and you can get calcium in many ways. Said stupid is stupid when they want to ignore facts that suit their own agendas. Yeah, I just find it interesting that a lot of these positions were previously left-wing positions in the United States. And over time, it seems like a lot of our stupid has been filtered into the Republican Party, and a lot of the dumb that used to be associated with liberal politics is now over there. It's very, very strange to me that this is the case. Continuing on here, to be clear, raw milk is still a niche product. According to an FDA study relying on 2016 and 19 data, 4.4% of Americans report consuming raw milk in the past year, although the number has almost certainly grown since then. Though raw milk's appeal remains small, it is increasing popularity among Republicans and nevertheless demonstrates a scrambling of the political polls in which the American left of center, long associated with anti-establishment sentiment, has become more deferential to institutions as the right of center, long associated with the establishment, has seized the iconoclastic fervor inherent in America's DNA. In the words of Schultz, now in Iowa state senator, cycle after cycle, we find new office holders just becoming more freedom-oriented and less trusting of government on all levels. Let's see here. Progressivism was on the rise at the turn of the 20th century with the widespread belief that science would help build a safer and healthier country. Naturally, when milk pasteurization was proven to be effective, city officials rushed to adopt it. New York City was the first to mandate pasteurization in 1910. Other cities quickly followed suit, and states began to ban the sale of raw milk as well. At first, the added cost of pasteurization would have frustrated the dairy industry, but eventually the additional standards came to be appreciated by the industry's biggest players. After all, pasteurization gave them an edge over smaller dairies that couldn't afford the pasteurization machinery, while simultaneously allowing them to have low cleanliness standards without risking harm to the consumer. The final and biggest blow to raw milk came nearly 80 years later when a federal judge ruled in favor of Ralph Nader-founded advocacy group Public Citizen and banned all interstate sale of raw milk. Okay, so this one actually lines up with the research that I did on milk before even doing this video, how a lot of the dairy industry are the ones that are able to afford this process, and it actually did end up kicking out a lot of farmers who originally were selling raw milk. But at this point, you have to ask yourself, what are the health benefits of raw milk versus pasteurized milk? If the vitamin content is the same, if the mineral content is the same, if the calcium content is the same, then why would you not want the cleaner milk? Why would you not want the milk that comes with fewer risks? Is the 1 or 2% added health benefit of the raw milk, if we grant that there is a health benefit of the raw milk, is that worth the risk of disease that comes from raw milk? I don't think it is. I don't think it is worth it at all. I see a lot of people in my chat saying that there are no benefits to raw milk. I'm willing to grant them that there are benefits to raw milk. I'm willing to grant them that they exist. And I still don't find that it's enough of an argument to move away from regular milk, or like regular being pasteurized milk. Or if you prefer, if you're vegan, if you're lactose intolerant, any of the milk alternatives that exist out there, almond milk, soy milk, anything like that, are also options that you can have that are going to be cleaner and better. Now, it is interesting to me that the pasteurization was also seen as a cost-cutting measure because they could have lower cleanliness standards, because you don't have to have as clean of an environment for your milk to be in if you're going to be sanitizing it in the first place anyway. That skeeves me a little wrong, but I can understand the sentiment. So in the 2000s, there was never any question what slice of political spectrum the organic revolution belonged to. Liberals, of course. Michelle Obama had her own organic garden. She was spotted at a 2009 date night with Barack Obama in New York City at Blue Hill, a $145 plate farm-to-table restaurant whose chef and co-owner, Dan Barmer, told The Guardian he would start his hypothetical final meal with a swig of raw milk. Whole Foods, the expensive natural vibe grocery store that sold raw milk at the time, was an unquestionable winner of the era. The chain was so popular with Democrats that Dave Wasserman, an election analyst at the Cook Political Report, came up with an easy way of predicting an election. The counties with the Whole Food voted for the Democrat, and the counties with a Cracker Barrel voted for Republican. The New York Times wrote an article in 2010 about raw milk, one of the many sympathetic articles from that time period, that put raw milk consumption alongside other food movements picking up steam in America: organic, buy local, vegan, vegetarian, and the like. David Gumpert, a former Businessweek columnist and Wall Street Journal reporter, wrote extensively about raw milk during this era. His book, Raw Milk Revolution, chronicled the battle between state regulators and farmers who were willing to break the law to give health-conscious consumers what they want at a price far higher than what they could fetch from a dairy distributor. Gumpert was and is an advocate for drinking raw milk, and his writings, lambasting over regulation of the product, were published in unquestionably left-leaning outlets like The Nation and grist, which is also interesting to me because now when we talk about regulation for industry, generally speaking, it's the leftists who are going to be in favor of more regulation, whereas the conservatives are generally in favor of less regulation. And of course, that's a bad stance to take usually, because then you get shit like the boar's head listeria outbreak that's been happening recently. But you know, it's better to have standards than no standards when we're distributing food. Just saying. So how did raw milk go from the darling of organic liberals, deserving and sympathetic coverage in the New York Times and the New Yorker, to the conservative culture war signal that is a sweetheart of deep red state legislatures? Two things happened at once. First, liberal elites gave up on it. Iowa Democrats overwhelmingly voted against the raw milk bill. It no longer gets sympathetic coverage in the New York Times, Washington Post, and New Yorkers. Whole Foods no longer sells it. Whole Foods is also now owned by Amazon, the trillion-dollar retailer whose employees donated overwhelmingly to Joe Biden over Donald Trump. COVID is sure to have played a role here as well. The era where many liberals internalized that trusting the experts distinguished them from Trump and those they considered anti-science or anti-vax. One study found that whether a school planned to reopen in the fall of 2020 was much more related to its county's support for Trump in 2016 than it was its actual local COVID numbers. At the same time, conservatives discovered that raw milk fit neatly inside a worldview that was increasingly skeptical of credentialed expertise, though in some ways it had always been a natural fit. As conservative writer Rod Dreher put in a 2002 essay called Crunchy Cons about his love for the organic, despite its liberal tinge and predictable sneering of his Republican colleagues, conservatism is in part defined now by the belief that, generally speaking, small and local, in particular and old, are better. Much more recently, Carmel Richardson wrote for the American Conservative after Iowa's raw milk law went into effect that the law evoked the ghost of a rugged ethos present in America's culture and history. Raw milk legalization is also deregulatory, as I was reminded by Alexia Kowik, the executive director to the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund, which seeks to protect farmers' rights that sell raw milk among other products. But there's an element far more important than a deregulatory environment or traditional aesthetics. Trust. Symbolically, whether you vote for the Democratic Party today can often be defined by a single question: do you trust the experts? As Susie Wise explained for the Free Press last January, drinking raw milk is often a giant middle finger to the experts, the same ones who say Joe Biden isn't cognitively impaired, that Donald Trump is the worst president in the history of America, and that drinking raw milk is like playing Russian roulette with your health. As the director of the FDA or the FDA once said, the FDA Division of Dairy and Egg Safety once said, to be clear, the CDC's own study says raw milk is estimated to cause 3 deaths from 1998 to 2018, while oysters cause 100 deaths a year. For new consumers, raw milk is a symbol. To drink, and especially to produce raw milk, is a way of breaking with convention and raging against the machine. The United States Departments of Agriculture and Centers for Disease Control, the FDA, doctors and PhDs, state regulators, and Big Dairy. So the interesting thing about that to me, though, is that oftentimes, if you're going to the store and buying raw milk, you're buying it from the same dairy distributors that are selling all of the other milk brands as well. It's the illusion of choice thing. You're not actively making a political statement. You are just gambling with your health instead of, you know, doing anything that matters at all. So it's not that, but the article does pose something very interesting to me. The fact that, yes, whenever Republicans are doing this, whenever they're doing the whole drinking raw milk thing, it is a status symbol. It is a symbol that they don't trust experts, that you know better than the experts, which is an interesting position, right? It's a strange position to take because it's a position that is almost always based entirely on ignorance. Ask yourself this. And honestly ask yourself this: do you know better than an expert in the health and dairy field? Let's go ahead and say that expert has a PhD in their field and has 20 years of experience in their field, in what would be considered the cleanliness of dairy, just as an example. Would you consider for a moment that that person might know a little more about a niche subject than you? We are not asking if they are smarter than you, generally speaking, which seems to be the case that a lot of Republicans seem to think, is that I'm smarter than a doctor, I'm smarter than those bigwigs. Nobody is saying that you are dumber than them, though depending on the things you say, I might be saying that. Nobody is saying that you are individually less intelligent overall than another human being. What is being said is, if you were to go to a car mechanic, would you try to talk over that car mechanic if you had a problem with your car and you did not know what the issue was and you needed to solve that issue, whatever it might be? Would you say that the car mechanic was wrong? Some of you might, but oftentimes you would accept the expertise of that. Let's say you're a construction worker. Would you want somebody to trust your expertise when you're building a house? Or would you want them to constantly fight you on whether or not it's okay for you to put the stairs in a way that's going to cause them not to break their knees? You are the expert there. You would prefer that they get their information from an expert and not some random YouTube video. So, the interesting thing to me is that these same people who live in rural areas, who work in these fields that have broad expertise, do not like experts in other fields that they are unfamiliar with. So the question posed is, if you want somebody to listen to your expertise on a subject that you believe wholeheartedly you are an expert in, or at least very experienced in, why would you not pay the same homage to somebody else? Why would you not pay the same respect to a doctor who's been working for 16 years? Or say, in this case, somebody who works in the dairy industry? Is it just because you don't trust people who get paid for having those opinions? Because I can kind of understand that, but when you do not trust somebody for that, you can always do things like following the money where that is, or even easier, you can find the studies that actually say what is or is not okay to do in the dairy industry. And those studies are probably performed by other experts. Experts that, again, if you were the one in the shoes of the expert, you would prefer somebody else listen to you. It's an interesting proposal that you are smarter than everyone else around you, including in niche fields that you just now started looking into yesterday. Probably because some conservative influencer or politician signaled that you should do so. It's interesting to me that these people fight tooth and nail as hard as they can against regulation in an industry where regulation is necessary, like food and pharmaceuticals. So they're fucking entitled and deluded by it. A lot of people are. But the thing is, a lot of people who do act this way don't realize they are. They aren't putting two and two together on the fact that they are an expert in a field. They would prefer somebody listen to their expertise on that thing. But then when they showcase that they are not willing to listen to an expert in another field, is that reflects very negatively on them. That doesn't really occur to a lot of them. And so that brings us back to Matt Walsh, where irrespective of how this entire culture war shift has gone, he has created the army of anti-science people in his own movement. And so when the clock is right twice a day, when Matt Walsh is entirely okay with scientific consensus on what is considered safe and not safe when it comes to dairy, the fact that his audience rebels against him is strangely confusing to him. He built an audience distrusting of experts. He built an audience distrusting of science. So when science and experts say that pasteurization is a net good thing to keep food clean and healthy, of course, they are going to rebel against that. Because the conservative position for the last 5-6 years has been no position at all. The conservative position for a while now has been anti whatever the liberal position is, whatever the establishment position is. They look and see what the establishment or the experts or a liberal is saying, and they will do the opposite of that. And that is their position. As opposed to formulating an actual ideology of their own, it is an anti-ideology. An ideology that goes nowhere without an opponent. So they always end up needing an opponent basically forever. But Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. That's just my thoughts, and also a very interesting article from Politico on this particular subject. If you have any words to add, let me know in the comment section below. If you haven't already, consider liking, subscribing, maybe sending this video to a friend if you think that it would interest them. And as always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Mark Anthony, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that. Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.